So without further ado, I'm happy to welcome you all to No Researchers, No Problem, ReOps First at Clever, presented by Liza Pemstein.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. As Teresa mentioned, I'm Liza. I'm the Research Operations Manager at Clever, and we're an EdTech SaaS company providing schools and school districts with seamless access to their learning applications and data management. And I kind of just want to start off today by saying that I understand how spicy the title of this presentation may be, but I also understand the importance of and need for quality research and the role that researchers play in providing that value. So this presentation might end up being one big spicy hot take, but it is just my story and my experience, and hopefully some others in a similar position may find it helpful, hopefully. Okay, so how did it start? Well, essentially, I worked within the confines of and the reality of my company and how we were doing research, and how I could best help the company, the teams, and most importantly, the individual people doing research, the reason we're having this whole conference. So as I mentioned before, this may be a hot take, but as I see it, learning is learning and insights are insights. And the reality of my company is that we were gathering these insights and these learnings already. These conversations with our customers were already happening. So the direction that I chose to take was, how could we do it better? And how could I make the lives of the people doing research better? But it didn't just start with ResearchOps First. I had my own little journey getting here. So I started at Clever on the customer solutions team back in 2019 as a support representative. And I did that for a year and a half. And during that time, I learned a lot about our customers and technical aspects of the product. And we were already sharing this feedback that we were getting from the customers through support calls and tickets with different product teams. There's a lot of friction. We had to post in multiple Slack channels. We weren't logging things effectively. They were disappearing. And so I saw a need, and I worked with our engineers and our product success manager to develop what we call the feedback bot, to automatically share customer feedback from calls and tickets directly with the specific product team in Slack. So right to the source. And it was great. And now I had a hunger to solve these bigger efficiency problems, kind of in an effort to gain insight from our customers and build better products. So then at the end of 2020, the research operations role opened up on the design team, and I went out for it and I got it, which is great because now I'm here talking to you all. And I worked with my manager on what this role would look like. But essentially, we built it from scratch as I kind of went along. There wasn't really a set roadmap or plan. As we know, things change in the tech industry all the time. So I just sort of built it out as I saw it. I collected and researched pain points from chatting with our designers and PMs, our PWDRs, and found where I might best support our research efforts. And so, okay, what did I learn from talking to them? I learned that lots of people were conducting research or learnings or getting insights all across the company. And most consistently, it was our product designers and PMs. There were lots of one-on-one interviews over Zoom that were happening across product teams. And these were typically led by designers, with PMs conducting interviews as well in some cases. So I also learned that as a company, we try to get as many people involved as we can. So this meant having engineers on the calls, note-taking, asking questions themselves, and of course, marketing, also always doing customer research. And it was previously mostly larger scale surveys, but we were starting to see more overlap with our product and marketing research insights. So, okay, great. Research is happening, insights are happening. This is a good thing, right? Right. But the bad thing is that from an operational perspective, everything was being done differently. Okay, so after chatting with our teams and collecting their insights, as well as using past insights from a colleague who was previously at Clever, shout out to Luby, there were a few themes that emerged. So we have these main problem areas, and I noticed they were around recruitment and scheduling, incentives or thank you gifts, and then access to insights. And the largest amount of friction, kind of by far, was felt around recruiting and scheduling research participants. So many of you may know this includes lots of smaller little elements that make up these two sort of umbrella terms. And folks were also having trouble with managing incentives or thank you gifts. So not only were we not tracking these, but individuals were using their own money to buy gift cards, having to remember to send them out in a timely manner, expensing them at the end of the month, et cetera, et cetera. And needless to say, this was a huge pain in the to-do list. And finally, there was a lot of appetite for storing and accessing, having organized research findings and insights, both for sharing out as well as coming back to for later research. Okay, there were 4 problem areas, but I decided to focus on the first 3. So I looked at the problems, and these top 3 on the left were all really blocking people from doing research in their day-to-day activities. The last one, around access, while being super important, of course, was really just about accessing prior research. And I found that the amount of pain around doing research now and getting it done far outweighed the pain of folks not being able to access past research. And yeah, it was a tough choice knowing where to start, but I knew I needed to solve for the doing research now problems. Okay, so where did I start? I went to the lowest lift, highest impact, and that was incentives. So as I briefly mentioned, historically, everyone was sending these thank you gifts or incentives out to participants personally. And so what this looked like in practice was folks going into their personal Amazon account, because we were typically using Amazon, buying a gift card, emailing it to the participant, uploading these purchases into their expense account, submitting these expenses, and having to do this every single week and month. And it was a pain. This was a pain around submitting these expenses, which card or account they used, and confusion around there. But not only that, we weren't able to track this data. We weren't able to track how much we were spending, how much we were offering, if we were having repeat customers and how much they were getting in thank you gifts, which is clearly another issue that we would address later. But as kind of a fix, I started small, and I created this Jira ticketing system. So now folks would just come in, and this is one single step. They would just come in, enter the information, and I would take care of it. So now they could just focus on the research and the synthesis, and I could make sure that we thanked our customers for their time and insights. And this small step helped us get, on the right step with tracking and budgeting and expense management. And it lifted some of the administrative burden off our administrators, or off our designers, excuse me. And later on, which I'll talk about, we did adopt Great Question, and it's got even easier than this Jira ticketing system. So now participants can choose from a larger selection of gifts, or even donate to charity. It's all managed behind the scenes. It's made my job easier. It's added some autonomy to my colleagues, and removed a lot of friction around this piece of research. Okay, so we sort of solved for incentives and thank you gifts. What comes next? Okay, now comes the bigger issue, tackling this recruitment and scheduling pain. So to start, after talking with folks on the team, I learned that everyone was basically reinventing the wheel each time with their research. We have some tenured PMs who were able to locate potential participants through our internal tools, but new hires had no idea how to get started or where this information even lived, let alone how to reach out to people, once they had them. And we also had varying levels of research experience, either while at Clever or coming from other companies. So there was that hurdle to tackle also. But as I said in the beginning, learning is learning and insights are insights. And we wanted these conversations to happen. So in the cases where people were able to locate these potential participants and email them and schedule them, we were still hitting another problem, which some of you may be familiar with: no-shows. So all this friction resulted in more reactive research. We're doing kind of last minute, less planned, less time spent in the overall planning phase of projects. And after hearing all of this, in my opinion, I felt there was a big need for a dedicated participant management tool, but we just weren't there yet. So first, I created a sort of lightweight research playbook, which included best practices for email outreach, including email copy, incentive/thank you gift offerings, how to use a catchy subject line to intrigue people to even open these emails in the first place. And my thinking here was that while I worked on this larger hurdle and kind of pain area of participant management and a system, why not give my colleagues better tools and processes and kind of ways of going about recruiting and conducting this research using our existing methods. So also during this phase, and I continue to do this, I consult and provide specific email copy and suggestions to help them get more participants. I created lots of templates that they could choose from so they could copy and paste certain pieces and use them in existing copy that they already written. Example subject lines, they could kind of mix and match, choose your own adventure, Mad Libs it. So all of this was working. This was getting them kind of on their merry way. And then I got to work on the participant management piece. So as I briefly touched on, people were previously requesting lists of candidates either from me directly or their PM. If their PM was out, it would be me. And I would collect this pertinent information from them, so their audience type and any essential criteria they needed for their study. And then I would use our internal tool to find a cohort of candidates that they could reach out to. Then I would provide the CSV to them, which they'd then upload and email them. And it was all very slapdash and kind of as needed, like, quick, I need these, X amount of people that fit this criteria, then it would just sort of be like, go here. So I decided that we needed something. And I decided to create a participant database in none other than Google Sheets, which, near and dear, it's getting shinier every day. So for this, I chose to use only one of our user audiences to start with. And we typically have 3 to 4 user types or audiences or personas. And I surveyed these teams for any pertinent criteria that they might need for their various studies. And I included most of this criteria in this new shiny Google Sheet database. So now when teams needed to find participants, they would come to this snazzy Google Sheet and they would filter down on their criteria and find a list of participants to email. So they would then download a CSV and uploaded it to our mail merge tool that we were using for research. They would then come back to the Google Sheet and manually check a box if they reached out to them, indicating that they were essentially off limits to anyone else if they were looking for similar participants or audience members, users. And then they would come back and check another box if they interviewed them and add dates for tracking. So needless to say, it was very helpful, but it was also still quite manual. However, the beauty of this was that it allowed folks to see the value of having these candidates easily accessible and visible and trackable, and they were able to get research done just a bit faster. And in this world, a bit can actually be a lot. So yay, but it still felt kind of difficult, and it only accounted for one of our user audiences. So Google Sheets was the MVP that we tested and learned from and proved that there was a need for a tool. Okay, so insert my pitch for a tool, an official pitch. So after researching and vetting and demoing other tools, we piloted Great Question. The rest is history. Just kidding, but also not kidding. So, with Great Question, and they are not paying me to say this, and I'll say that a couple times, our teams were able to locate these participants themselves, and they could email them and invite them to participate in a research study. They could conduct the study. They could safely store the recordings and transcripts and then automatically thank them and pay them for their time and insights. And they could also do some share outs to their team and across the company. So they did not pay me to say this, but in all seriousness, Great Question has really allowed our teams to conduct research at record speeds. And it's also, maybe more importantly, restored confidence and excitement around doing research and getting research done and getting people involved. And personally, as a team of one, supporting about 10 to 15 PWDRs, having this end-to-end tool has allowed me to focus on other things because there are always other things, right? Okay, so what's next for Research Ops at Clever? Excellent question. Research enablement. Okay, so you might be saying, what does that mean? Well, essentially, as I see it, we've democratized the process of doing research. And I know that democratization is a hot button word, but we have. And now it's time to essentially democratize our research knowledge and skills. We've gotten the nuts and bolts of doing research figured out, including building overall excitement around research, which is a huge hurdle and milestone for us. And now I want to focus on building our research capabilities and methodologies. Let's introduce some new methods here. So we're moving us from process to method. We have the quantity, and now we need to focus on the quality. Okay, so how am I doing this? How am I enacting this enablement? Well, one example is that I noticed that as research was being more widely done and kind of spoken about across the company, I noticed there was a hunger for more research. And teams wanted to hear about what others were doing, what was working for them, what new things they'd learned. And I used this exercise that I did from the Nielsen Norman ReOps course, which I really do recommend. And I ran 2 sessions, one with designers and one with PMs. So this was an exercise in identifying both collective and individual research strengths and opportunities, as well as just different areas of interest around research, because where there's excitement, there's more learning. So this turned into what I call the Research Ops Knowledge Share Program, which is a mouthful. So why not call it ROCKS? Because also, why not use a catchy name when you can? And in these sessions, individuals share their research experiences, tools or methods, and best practices they've learned. So I am just a facilitator in these sessions, both as a non-expert on all things, and also just being one person who can't be in multiple places at once, having these experiences. So, ultimately the goal with the ROCKS program is to unsilo this knowledge that lives within one person or one team in an effort to build up all of our skills. So as a concrete example, we did one on service blueprints, and we had one of our designers share her experience using service blueprints and service design to better understand the various touch points and friction areas of a certain user experience. So then after the session, I created a template so that folks could take what they learned from the session and use the template and put it into action in their work. And people used it, which is great. There were actually multiple teams that used the service blueprint in crucial research and product development across the company. So yay. And what did I learn? So I learned that by identifying the gaps, it could set me up for success on this journey. So being curious and asking these questions, I was able to uncover these gaps and these problem areas and kind of come up with a roadmap. So then once I knew where we were wasting time or resources, it was easier to kind of be more confident in these decisions that I was presenting. No one wants to waste resources, right? So I got louder. I said what we needed. We tested out some things, and who doesn't love an experiment? And now we have a process and a tool. And now it's just a matter of getting more people involved in the process and building up their skills. And this is how we're going to scale in 2023. And just as a quick note on the problem of accessing insights that I mentioned at the very beginning, there was talk about whether we should build a repository first instead of focusing on the front end aspects of research. However, my assumption was that if we build out solid processes for research in the beginning, then the repository would sort of come naturally, and it would also be more organized and therefore more valuable. And the real issue, as I saw it, was sharing out insights within a team or across the company, and essentially visibility into research being done. And as I mentioned earlier, my focus for the first half of 2023 is research enablement, continuing to build out our processes, but also strengthening our collective research skills and knowledge, but it is still important for people to have some access to these valuable insights, right? Visibility into research being done, insights happening. So in the meantime, we have addressed the issue of access in some ways in the meantime. So right now I send out a biweekly research digest, and this is for visibility on the research being conducted across multiple teams. So people can check it out, they can subscribe to Slack. And speaking of that, I also built a Slack listener so that when anyone shares research insights or highlights in a public-facing channel and then uses the user research Reactgy, it'll automatically cross-post into the research channel because we don't need to be subscribing to hundreds of millions of Slack channels. People can just subscribe to one, see what's going on, and then if they want to, they can join another channel and get more involved in the research being done over there. But this has led to more collaboration and communication across teams around research studies, all happening at a given time. And it's also preventing some duplicate research. So I will be the first to admit that the reason we don't do as much secondary research is partly because it's not easily accessible. So, right, it's a kind of a chicken and the egg situation here. But to reiterate, as I saw it, the immediate need really was to solve for the kind of keep going part of research first. And the repository and access and secondary research would fall into place, so to speak. And notably, Great Question has a lightweight repository, which has gotten us started for now. And we've already had several teams use these to share out highlight reels. They're not paying me, but that has really helped in the meantime. So, okay, what can you take away from this presentation of mine? Well, okay, whether you're in ReOps or you're a researcher or a person who does research, I'd say that it can be really helpful to focus on the what can be done now kind of more quickly while you work to solve these bigger, harder things that are going to just take more time. So start by looking at your organization. Every organization is different. You're going to hear across every talk. It depends. It depends on your organization. So start by asking around, finding out, what the annoying things are and where you can get some quick wins. Always be listening for opportunities and be patient because this stuff takes time. I also really recommend testing out MVPs before jumping into a tool. So not only will that make a better case if you do find a tool and choose to kind of make a case to purchase it, but folks will probably be more likely to adopt this new tool, having seen glimmers of hope of how good things could be for them. And again, not paying me to say this, but there are tools out there that can help. And so I chose Great Question because it worked for our company and our needs, but I also evaluated a bunch of different tools. And especially when it comes to ops, it's nearly impossible to start with ReOps First and be a team of one. I know that's the title of this presentation, but you will just admin yourself to death. So if you can offload some of the admin to a tool, then you can scale and support more and more teams, which leads to more insights and bigger impact, which is great. And the last thing I just want to say is I am not a trained researcher, but I am curious. And that's kind of where it starts. And I think that's really helped me in this role and on this path as research operations. So I want to know how we can improve either via our product or our people or our processes. And just asking these questions from the start really highlighted opportunities for improvement. And also, I just want to make the lives of my colleagues easier day to day. So if that's happening, then I get to feel like I'm doing a good job. And that's research operations in a nutshell at Clever. Thanks so much.